17th episode of Concussion Chats. My name is Taya. Concussion Chats is a podcast hosted by the McGill students for the Concussion Legacy Foundation, with the help of Nick from Concussion Talk Podcast. We're dedicated to providing hope and strength to those suffering from concussions through sharing experiences. Today I have a recording of Jordan. Jordan is a personal trainer and a chronic illness coach who has fully recovered from a traumatic brain injury as well as chronic Lyme disease. Jordan uses his social media platforms to show what life can be like post-recovery and how to get there. Jordan believes in the power of the mind and swears by his consistent meditation practice.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jordan, and so I have, in my own mind, I've recovered from my traumatic brain injury as well as previous concussions and lots of injuries and illnesses, I guess my entire childhood and early adulthood. But to start it off, in 2016, how I got my traumatic brain injury was I came home from Australia. I did a semester abroad in Australia, and it was the summer. We were at a cottage, and I dove off of a lake in Muskoka, and I hit the bottom of the lake. I split my head open, and I did some pretty gnarly damage to my neck and my head. I was rushed to I wasn't rushed. I called an ambulance, and they took me to the hospital, and they did a CT scan, and they told me nothing was wrong with my brain. I had about 14 staples in my skull, and they told me I got off lucky. Anyways, at the time I was working in finance. I was in my third year of university at Queen's. I was taking my business degree there, my undergrad. And I take the train for an hour and a day to go from my house to Toronto. And I really started to notice that I was getting these really wicked headaches and something was wrong with my head. So I finished out my summer internship. Let's say it was from June, July, August. I was able to get through it, but my symptoms just kept growing. And with the no diagnosis, without any medical indication that I had something wrong, it was getting a little bit scary. So I went into my fourth and final year at Queen's University, and by October, so I was there from like September. I went home in frost because I just couldn't handle the noise and the amount of people there and the partying. I wasn't partying, but I couldn't handle that stimulus, and I ended up withdrawing in October just because of the extreme pain. And I ended up seeing a doctor at Queen's, actually Dr. Douglas Cook, DJ Cook, who has become a great family friend and somebody that's helped me a lot. And he did a functional MRI, which is basically they put you in an MRI machine and they deprive you of oxygen and they feed you CO2 to see what you're like under stress or in like a stressful situation or an active situation to see how your brain responds. And then I did a bunch of other functional tests with computers and all that. And through the functional MRI, my previous CT scans and all the other tests, he determined that I had a traumatic brain injury. They told me the parts of my brain that were affected and that I tore my rectus capitis, which is one of the muscles in your neck that connects to your skull. So with that diagnosis, it made it pretty straightforward to me to know that I needed to start treatment. Another thing that they found, which I found really interesting, was a huge sinus infection in my frontal sinuses. Now I've had, if we're going back in my timeline, let's go back to like 2002. I was born in 1995. So like when I was like 6, 7, I was really sick and I was on chronic antibiotics. I was on antibiotics for chronic infection every single year. So around December every single year, I get sick, I get a sinus infection, put on antibiotics. And then that was a repeating history up until I was like 20. So when this injury happened, I was still getting antibiotics every year. So I just had this chronic infection that DJ or Dr. Douglas Cook said, you have to remove this infection surgically in order for your healing to start. And at that time, I was listening to what every single doctor said. So I said, let's go for it. The wait in Canada was about 6 to 8 months. So luckily I had, my family was able to send me to the States to get the surgery done. So I got the surgery done. We're still in 2016, November 2016. And within 4 weeks post-surgery, an artery ruptured in my frontal sinus and my nose was bleeding like a faucet. And basically what had happened was they must have nicked an artery during surgery, repaired it, but the scab came off and my artery was like, the blood was coming out. It was gnarly again. But anyway, so I had to go in for an emergency surgery there. Once it was fixed, I could begin my concussion recovery. Now in 2016, it wasn't my first concussion. I actually played junior A hockey. In high school, I played like elite minor hockey through high school. And in 2011, so I was in my grade 11 year, so my first year of junior A, I had a pretty wicked concussion as well. I was cutting across the ice. I cut across the middle. And as a 15-year-old, I weighed about 135 pounds. I got hit by like a 220-pound 21-year-old, and I was immediately concussed. But the same thing, I don't know if this is something that's just for me or for a lot of people. I didn't have symptoms for about 2 days. I remember I went to the movies with the team. We did our community service. We used to do community service at the movies. And then I started getting symptoms about 3 days later, and I told my coach I couldn't come to practice. I went into school. I was removed from school. I couldn't do any type of stimulation, and then I started physiotherapy. So in 2011 was kind of my first introduction into this concussion and like the darkness and how you have to remove stimulation. And it was about the same time that Sidney Crosby was actually going through his concussion, so it was all over the media. And at the same time, I was kind of navigate these waters. But as a 15-year-old, you're kind of invincible, so I didn't really think anything of it. But I did miss about 8 months of school. I was in chronic pain, and I got a math tutor. I actually went from about a 60% math student, 65% math student, to about a 90 to 100% math student. And that's just one of a plus from it. But maybe it's possibly I had new synapses or new neural connections, or maybe I was just really focusing on math because I couldn't do anything else. But I ended up going back to high school in May, and I completed summer school for calculus, and then I did extremely well in grade 12, continued playing junior A hockey. Again, I went to Queen's University. I removed myself from the extreme levels of hockey. I still played junior B. I maintained a great GPA. In 2015, I'm just skipping through my timeline here to make it a little faster for you guys to get to the concussion stuff. I did a semester abroad in Australia. And this is where I started getting symptoms that made no sense. So you'll see in the Instagram stories, I'm gonna do an Instagram takeover today, but my face literally turned to cardboard. It looked like I had no blood or water in my face. I get these extreme rashes all over my body. And looking back on it now, it's probably my first interaction with Lyme disease. But at the time, again, I'm like a 19-year-old enjoying my time in Australia. I had no idea what was going on. The doctors told me it was an allergic reaction. They put me on a steroid, and that was it. And then in the summer of 2016, I just explained that I dove into a lake and I hit bottom. Now we moved past my sinus surgeries that were in the end of 2016, but in 2017, I started seeing a chiropractor. And I'm not for or against chiropractic. It might help a lot of people through their problems, but after talking to my neurosurgeon and later down the line in my recovery, I started getting stem cell injections, PRP and Prolo in my neck. I had something called an unstable or a hyper-adjusted neck. So every day in 2017, I was seeing my chiropractor and I was getting adjusted. So adjustments are they would crack my neck and supposedly realign my spine. And now that chiropractor did know that I had a torn rectus capitis, but at the same time, it was the theory that it would help me. And in my own personal opinion, it helped in the moment, but in the long run, it may have led to an unstable neck, and it caused further damage because of the chronic corrections. Something that did help in 2017 was I was getting magnesium injections in Kingston. So that was really cool. So I was going to a pain clinic in Kingston where also my doctor, Douglas Cook, was working, and they would inject magnesium into the muscles that weren't releasing. So if you're like me and you had these chronic tense muscles, I couldn't get my shoulders away from my ears, my neck was so tense. I was in a neck collar for 3 years of my life. I couldn't stop wearing a neck collar because if I did, I'd get these insane headaches. But they were doing magnesium injections, and that was really great. I'd probably say about 5 to 6 days of comfort after these magnesium injections. And they're not a cure. They're not a quick fix. They are a quick fix, but they're not a cure. And there's something that just led to comfort. So again, in 2017, it's kind of my first year of healing. I had no idea what's going on. That's where I started. Another thing I did in 2017, which I highly recommend that hopefully nobody does, is I got a nerve block. And I had a nerve block injected into about C5, C6. It was supposed to be in C5, C6. I believe it was in my T-spine. But what that is a corticosteroid and had depomedrol. And what that was supposed to do was help me with my pain and allow me to go back to school and finish out my degree. But what it did was it sent me into this really, really insane pain cycle that lasted for about 2 years, where I was then stuck in a neck collar because my neck had no function because of the corticosteroid. And I was, oh, sorry, my computer just did something. I think you can still see me though. All right, coming back. And then, so what that corticosteroid did was it knocked out the function of my neck. My head couldn't really know where my neck was in space. And I was back to phase 1 or below phase 1. I actually think that I was way worse off. And I was extreme pain. Some days I'd experience paralysis. And yeah, it was brutal. But good things come from that, because now that I did that, in 2018, I found floating. So what floating is another thing that's incredible. So saltwater tanks, there's 1,000 pounds of salt, which creates density in this water that allows you to float and kind of like defeat gravity. And my first experience of floating was in 2018, and it was amazing. So I hadn't started meditation at the time. I'm really into it now, but I really enjoyed the floating. So you go into a float tank for an hour or 2 hours, or whatever you prefer. I did 30 minutes to start, and you just lay. And it was honestly the only place I could experience a pain-free zone. I was in 24/7 pain otherwise. I couldn't sleep because of my squeezing temporal headaches. And in this float tank, I literally had zero pain, and I wanted to stay in forever. I actually had my parents put one in our basement. I have one at my place now. I have an inflatable float tank in my basement that I used to use every single day. But at the time I was living with my parents, and they put one in their basement, and I was in it 2 hours a day. I'd go in the morning and the evening. It would allow me to get to bed. And if you're stuck in that pain cycle, if you have been stuck in that pain cycle, it's honestly amazing. And I don't think it gets enough credit for what it did for my recovery. I believe that it broke the pain cycle that I was experiencing, because I think that your body can remember pain. You have muscle memory, you have pain memory, and neurologically, I was stuck in this pain cycle that was hard to break. So in 2018, I found the float pot. In 2018, I also found frequency healing. So that was really interesting, because that's not a concussion related, or it could be, but that was for my chronic Lyme disease. I saw a doctor, her name was Kyle Morgan in Michigan, and I began something called Rife treatment. And what Rife treatment is a radio frequency treatment that is targeted based on frequencies in your body. So the theory is that every single pathogen, antigen, disease, pain, or whatever resonates at a frequency. And healthy frequencies resonate high, like super high. So they're untouchable, whereas unhealthy or dead frequencies, or frequencies that are causing issues, resonate lower. And through a resonance scanner, they scanned my body biometrically. They found which frequencies were in my body, and I self-treated for 8 months. And along with naturopaths and other doctors, I was cured of an incurable chronic Lyme disease in 8 months, and I was fully healed by November 2019. So when I was fully healed in November 2019 of chronic Lyme disease, I noticed my headaches were dissipating. And at the same time that I was doing frequency healing in 2018, I also started PRP, Prolotherapy, and stem cell injections in my hip. So yeah, let's reverse until 2017. So in 2017, it's not really something I talk about because it's kind of personal, but I had testicular surgery because I had an infection in my epididymis, which was misdiagnosed as a varicocele. And I had a failed surgery, and then post that, I actually went on ciprofloxacin for what they called a post-surgery infection, which I think was previous to surgery. It doesn't matter. And ciprofloxacin ended up, I was doing gymnastics at the time, which was also another thing I'll talk about, but I tore my hip labrum doing gymnastics. And as a 20-year-old, I went to go see a surgeon in Ontario, and he told me I needed a new hip. And that just really wasn't an option for me, being 20, needing a new hip. I was already knowing that I was on the right track to heal my Lyme disease, and I thought that this was Lyme related. So instead of getting a new hip, what I did was I started getting PRP, Prolo. I actually didn't do stem cells, but I got PRP and Prolo injections in my hip. Now, the idea behind Prolotherapy is it's actually a chemical designed to tighten ligaments surrounding a joint to allow that joint to heal better. And the idea behind PRP, which is platelet-rich plasma, is it's your own blood taken out of your body, spun so that you get the white or the red platelets, I forget which is which, and then it's re-injected in your body to promote healing. It promotes inflammation, which then triggers healing. I honestly did 8 rounds of injections in my hip. My hip is my good hip now, which is really weird. And then that gave me the courage, or like the will to go and do it in my neck. And I think my dad and I have different opinions here, but I think I did 15 rounds of PRP, Prolo, and stem cells in my neck. He thinks it's maybe 10 to 12, but I have a little bit of a different opinion. But anyways, the PRP, Prolo, and stem cells, I got them done in Fort Myers, Florida. And they're the reason I was able to come out of the neck collar, start doing neck exercises, eye exercises. I actually have a computer in my basement where I do all those touchscreen, kinetic tape, all that stuff that I think a lot of people do for concussions. But I owe a lot to the PRP, Prolo, and stem cell injections. So I started that in 2018 in my hip. About later in 2018, when I'd done the 8 rounds in my hip and my hip was, let's call it healed or cured or not in need of surgical repair anymore, I started in my neck. And I did that until about the middle of 2019. And then I went back to school. I completed my degree and I continued with a naturopath, a nutritionist, and yeah, that's where I am today. But something else that I wanted to bring up in terms of healing was my naturopath stuff. So my diet and my what worked for me was I immediately removed gluten and dairy from my diets as inflammatory foods, and I was on certain supplements to promote brain health, and I don't really remember what all of them were at the moment, but I can definitely get a list of them for anybody that's interested. But those were specifically targeted for me because I also have Lyme disease. But since 2019, we've had about a 2-year period. I would say that my recovery has been completely nonlinear. So I talk about my recovery being like up, 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 up. But as we all know, through concussion recovery, it's a completely nonlinear process. You can have good days, bad days, sideways days, up and down, and you could be trending up and then you can go down, which is really difficult. And luckily for me, my trend's been up, and I've been feeling great for the past 2 years. But there are still those periods of time where I have that off day or that off week or that off month where it's a bad trend. And I just wanted to bring that up because I know that we all want to have like a linear recovery. We want it to be trending upwards. And I mean, in reality for me, it was up and down. But up and down, I mean it's trending up, but I had all those up and down cycles. So I want to talk about some underrated treatments that worked for me that I don't think get enough praise. So the first one was osteopathy. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but it's a form of chiropractic care where there are no adjustments and it's craniosacral. So their theory is that your cerebral spinal fluid can get stuck, and what they do is they use your head and your hips or your cranial and your sacrum, and they do some really amazing movements that actually made me feel like I was in the salt pod laying on the table. I'd fall asleep every single time, and I believe that promoted healing. The other one is floating, which I already talked about in the saltwater deprivation tank. Meditating, which I have become a big proponent of, or a big supporter of. And it's not that I meditate and I say a mantra or I go and I just sit there, but I get mental clarity. So what I do is I go on YouTube. At the time of healing, I'd search like pain or stress and meditation. I'd sit there for 10 minutes. I'd listen and I'd follow along on the meditation, and that was great at the time. But now what I do is more centered around like mindfulness and trying to gain control of my thinking and thoughts. Because I feel like when I had a concussion or a traumatic brain injury and I was dealing with Lyme disease, I had a very negative thought cycle. And one of my biggest issues with my disease is I got stuck in that thinking of why me? Why did this happen to me? I was guilty because I dove off the lake and I hit bottom. So I blamed myself. I got in a cycle of blame for years, like probably four years, where I was blaming myself. Every day was negative. I would wake up and blame myself for the position I put myself in, for the position I put my family in. I would be negative. every single thought would be like, I can't do this career now. I can't finish my degree now because of what I did. Why did I do that? And what I found through meditation is I can become a passenger to those negative thoughts. And I've really instilled positivity in my life, where it was almost like the turning point, where those negative thoughts were the enemy, which was creating toxicity in my mental health and my physical health. And through like self-love, obviously self-love's so incredible, but through meditation, through journaling, through mindfulness techniques, like I have a mantra. Like I wrote this down every single day. So I'm going to take a little sidebar here. In my journal, every single morning, I wrote, I am grateful for being 100% healthy, happy, and pain-free. And that was when I wasn't 100% healthy, happy, or pain-free. But in the morning, to write something that I was expecting in the future and putting it into the present tense, and I wrote that every single morning, it instilled those values in me, instilled that feeling in me of getting there, because I had the issue of visualizing myself healthy. I had the issue of thinking of myself as being capable of doing something in the future because I wasn't able to do it right now. And I really found through that, through the mantra, through journaling, and through meditating, I was able to do that. So I'll move past that. But another thing is infrared sauna. If you've tried sauning or just a normal sauna, it's great for promoting a lot of things like blood flow, reduced inflammation. Like pain and soreness is all correlated, but infrared saunas go a layer deeper. So if you're ever interested in trying one out, I have one in my basement. I got one that fits in a closet. I use it every single day. It's incredible. You get a great sweat on. You don't need to go as hot. And I just find that I'm in a lot less pain when I use it. And then another treatment that I find is completely underrated is sleep. That's something that we all can do ourselves. And I always felt like I was behind, right? Like I'd wake up at 7 a.m. even though I had a TBI or a brain injury. And then, and then that was about it. But if you give yourself time to sleep, to really get a good sleep, to enjoy your sleep, then for me, it was a great big benefit. And then my final underrated treatment that worked for me was my PRP, Prolo, and stem cell injections. Now I'm all natural. Otherwise, like I have an all natural diet. I like to have as organics as much as possible. My fiance is a holistic nutritionist. I see a nutritionist monthly. But the PRP, Prolo, and stem cell, although Prolo are chemicals, and I don't really want to inject chemicals into my body that often, I feel like they did a great job of bringing my neck back to where it needed to be in order to reduce my headaches. And that was about it. So that's my story. That's my journey to where I am today. And now I'm a chronic illness coach. I do personal training. I finished my degree. And I live with my fiance. We have 2 dogs, and life's good. So if you guys have any questions for me, I'm happy to field them to help out with anything you have to ask.
Today I have Emily, who is also part of McGill Students for Concussion Legacy Foundation, Nick from Concussion Talk podcast, and his co-host, Aaron, who is also the coordinator for the Newfoundland and Labrador Brain Injury Association, joining me today. Jordan's story is crazy and quite a roller coaster, but it was really good. Like, I really enjoyed his talk, and I think so did the rest of the support group. And he did an Instagram takeover afterwards, and it went really well as well.
So what were the main questions for the Instagram takeover? Seems like a lot of like different practices, therapies and practices to try, and stuff to take and stuff. So
yeah, for the Instagram takeover, I think people asked about like therapies, things that worked best for him, dealing with symptoms, and how he dealt with like acceptance and stuff, and things like that.
What struck me about this was like it's like the juxtaposition to last piece that Laura was talking about. How she didn't really know anything. And she was kind of treated like as in, I don't know what she said after, but in her talk, it was more like, I don't know much, and I just found out I have a concussion and just tried to, be normal and just take it as it came. So it shows you kind of, and then this and Jordan and like Bailey and like Raphael, when you look forward to like let's see last year, but probably was last year, wasn't it? Yeah. And he was they tried a lot of therapies, go to a lot of places, and a lot of different things, but not available to a lot of people. But if you can try them, then why not, right? And they tried them, and Bark was standard for them, but like for Laura was, I don't know if Laura, again I'm here to talk, but and Aaron, you weren't here for Laura's talk, but she was more not like therapies that she tried, just that she's realization that she had a concussion, and she said that what she's going through, which doesn't really but never really had a lot of experience with it. So I guess it kind of shows you what the how it affects different people, and how trying different things maybe is the best way to go. Maybe it's just makes it more complex, makes it more. If you think there's so many options to try, it kind of also shows you where because how concussion research is not necessarily getting better, but it's just kind of like how there's all these disparate therapies to try, whereas like there's no one thing that works. There's no concentration on one on try to do this and do this. It's just like we'll try this, maybe this works, maybe that works, maybe pulling your left thumb works, maybe hitting your head and maybe pinching your nose and holding your breath for 10 seconds works. There's no way to...
Just like showing like how so many different things can work for so many different people. And that like sometimes it really comes down to like smaller things. Like I mean, Jordan said like the biggest thing for him like is the diet stuff. And that was one of the questions that people asked about was the diet stuff.
Yeah, I kind of relate to that, but that may be because of my cancer, but also the diet I feel like makes me just feel better. At least like been a week. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Emily, you look like you're ready to say something, maybe.
Yeah, I was just thinking. The diet thing is like I managed to do the no gluten, no dairy. I talked to him for a second after the Zoom session. Is I had read this book by Kevin Ballister about diet, which is a really, really interesting book, and it talks.
Yeah, I have that. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, some good motivation to eat better, but man, like it's like overwhelming with the amount of like information and things to watch out for, to the point to where like when I was doing the diet like Kevin Ballister had, I was like not eating half the time because I so didn't know what to do because there was so much information and I felt like there were so many moving parts.
You didn't want to eat the wrong thing, and didn't want to eat the wrong thing, and so you weren't eating at all, basically.
Yeah, it was like, oh my gosh, but I have to worry about not eating these things and eating these things a certain amount of times a week, and it was like crippling, like the amount of anxiety. Yeah, and so I was talking to Jordan afterwards, and I was like, how much do you look at the back of packages? Because I read this book, and how much do you worry about eating, organ meats twice a week and X, Y, Z? Because like I'm just still trying to figure out how to cook. And he was like, honestly, he was like, I do no dairy, no gluten. And the only time I really look at the back of a package is if I'm buying like oats, and I want to see like what kind of fillers they put in it. He's like, other than that, just try and focus on listening to your body and what your body needs. And I know for a fact that I do better without gluten and dairy. Like I've always known. I've cracked the joke for years that mac and cheese is a sleep attack in a bowl for me. I'm just gonna pass out if I eat dairy and gluten. And it's true. And when I was kind of doing the diet okay for like a split second, and it did make a massive difference. But I just wanted to say that that's something that we talked about afterwards is like, listen to your body. Maybe just try and do no dairy, no gluten. Don't, freak out about getting it perfect. because everybody's going to be different, and your body's going to focus on something, like want some things and not others, and don't necessarily follow it to a T. Like, don't follow what's on the paper to a T.
Because like, especially if you don't have an allergy or anything, like you can still consume small amounts of gluten and dairy, and it's not going to throw you off. Like, everything in moderation, like if you start with that kind of mindset and go into it and then find it easy, it's a lot easier to transition like to, okay, I'm going to focus a bit more on really avoiding them.
Right.
Yeah. And like, I think also, all right, do you guys hear that feedback too?
Yeah, I just did a bit.
A little bit, but it stopped.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I got it.
I think what it all comes down to, like Jordan said to you, Emily, like just listening to your body, like, that's the biggest thing. And I'm like you too, where like if I try to like follow something really strict, I get overwhelmed by like what can I and can I not eat. Like I was talking to a friend last week about like IBS and like the FODMAP diet, and like, I mean, I know it'd probably be great for my stomach and I wouldn't feel terrible all the time, but it's so restrictive that like I just would never eat. And I guess, listening to your body is the really big key.
Yeah. But I also, like, when I was listening to his talk, I was just like, wow. He went through so much there.
Oh,
like, aside from just, like, the concussion and Lyme disease, there was so much in there. And I just kept thinking, like, resilience.
Yeah.
He had a lot of resilience. And I liked how he was talking about how he'd write in his journal that he was thankful for being healthy every night, and that, like, acceptance works. And the other thing that I was thinking about when Nick was talking a few minutes ago is how, like, I think different people have different things that they're willing to accept.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Okay.
Like,
yeah.
Some people might be willing, or like, for example, like, I've been dealing with nightmares for years, and I've been willing to accept them until recently. I've been like, oh, maybe this is something I might want to change, but then I look into how that might have to change, and it's,
it's not worth it.
Well, it might be, but I'm looking at like EMDR, which is really intensive trauma therapy.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something that I'm not willing to do while I'm working full time and going to school full time.
Right.
Because that's going to involve a lot more self-care time that maybe I don't have. And so it's like, well, maybe for now I'm willing to accept this, and then down the road I can work on it. Or if I wake up tomorrow and my brain is like, no, my body is telling me, we're dealing with this now, then I'll have to look at it. But I think that relates to like different people being willing to deal with different things. And, I just think it's interesting. Yeah.
Cool.
I was rambling.
No.
I think the acceptance thing, and like kind of like what you just said about like being able to like accept something like right now and being okay with it right now, like I think it's also important to just like realize that like your levels of acceptance for different things like can change too, because I mean, something I've talked about with my psychologist has been about like, what is the focus right now? Like, what is the thing that needs to be dealt with right now? Like, what could be put to the side? And being okay with shifting what you're doing for what you need right now, and like in the moment, like what is most important.
And like, having like a priority list.
That's what it is. Yeah, like prioritizing what is most significant to you in the moment, and like realizing and like being okay with the fact that like your priorities can change and things can shift, and it may not stay the same forever, and you may want to come back to it later, like how Emily just said, like EMDR right now while working like a full-time job in school doing all these other things may not be what she needs to do, but like in the future it could be. And
I think it's so important too that like Emily, you were able to recognize that as well and be like, this is the boundary I have to set for myself, and like live within this, and if it's going to be kind of crappy for a little bit, at least I know I can come back there and reassess.
It's kind of like the whole like should and can thing. Like, was that my feedback or is that just my headset? Anyway, like you can like do all these therapies, but should you right now? Should you just wait? Like, just because you can doesn't mean you definitely need to or should.
Yeah.
At these moments, which is, I think Emily did a great job of that with your saying, like, you can do that in barotherapy, right, sure, but you shouldn't now.
Like, is it right for you right now or not?
Well, that, and I think with concussions and traumatic brain injuries, there are so many options, and it can be really stressful to be like, oh, I'm going to book physio on this day, I'm going to book the neurochiropractic on this day, I'm going to do vision on this day. And like, whew, you got to sleep sometimes.
And your head's not going to be able to store that necessarily.
From all these therapies, and you like, it's a lot.
And some people might be able to do that, but I think it's important to recognize that if somebody is feeling like they can't do all of those at once, it is okay to choose one route for now. It's okay to just see the vision therapist right now. It's okay to just see the physio right now, because you can always go back and see the others down the road. You know, they're not going anywhere. If anything, we're getting more of them.
Yeah.
They're definitely getting more of them. There's like so many different, so many, I mean.
No, that's a really good point though, Emily. Like, just like, you know, like, focus on what you can focus on right now. And I mean, like, even if it's only like, you can only handle like just seeing a psychologist right now, or you can only handle like just the one thing, like, that's okay. But you need to be able to like accept that in this moment, this is what I need to focus on, or in this moment, I can only take on so much. Because, like, I mean, like, even just, like, after an hour-long session with my psychologist, I'm beat. Like, I'm wiped out. Like, I couldn't imagine throwing on every form of therapy and, like, keeping up with all the things that you have to do outside of those therapies, too. Like, all the exercises and the stuff, too. It's a lot.
Yeah, if you're stretching yourself too thin too, you have to wonder, like, what am I really putting into all these things? Like, am I actually putting the work into this so that I will improve? And if the answer is like, I don't feel I'm putting in as much as I'm getting out, then you should probably consider all the things you are doing and prioritize again. Like, think,
so like,
this really bothers me, I want to deal with this first, and like go there first and kind of put more energy to that level.
Yeah, exactly. But you're hit that damn feedback again. That's annoying.
Yeah, I heard.
You heard that? Yeah, it's stupid. Yeah, what you're saying, that's all like what you're putting in, what you're putting is also like what you're getting out of it. If you're putting in, if you can't put in so much into a break, go to physio and you're beat from like your psychologist already, and you can't put anything into physio, then you're not getting anything out of it, and vice versa. And and any other therapy, really.
Yeah, it goes the other way, too. Like, if you're putting in a bunch of effort and you don't feel you're getting a lot out of something, maybe it's just not for you. Like, not every therapy has to be a cure-all. Like, there's, as we've mentioned, like, there's tons of therapies out there, and there's tons of different ones that work for different people. So, like, if you find it's not working, too, like, don't feel discouraged about it. Just be like, all right, maybe this isn't the one for me.
But
or
not
even in terms of like, I mean, I've had that experience like a lot with like finding the right person to see, like psychologist wise. Like, I went through lots of different therapists, I went through lots of different counselors, and you know, like Emily's always kind of said, like finding the right like therapist or psychologist is like dating, and like that's like the best way to think about it. And like once you think about it like that, like,
you shouldn't date your psychologist.
It's okay. Well, no, definitely nobody try and date their psychologist. That's so inappropriate. But like finding one is like dating, you know, like you're not gonna just settle on the very first person you see. And I mean, if you do, like, cool, great, but I think going in with that expectation that like the first person may not be the right person for you, just the same as like the type of therapy you're doing may not be the right therapy for you. The person you're working with on that therapy may not be the right person for you. Like maybe they're super like, I don't know, like tough love, and like you don't like tough love. You need a different kind of encouragement. And so I think finding someone that like matches you in that sense is also really important. And being able to advocate for yourself in that sense too. Like being able to say like, this isn't working for me. This is not what I need. And getting what you need.
Yeah. And sometimes your therapist too will be able to recognize like, I don't have the proper tools that you need as well.
Or and the like, means, for example, Emily was kind of hinting at there. The means to just do all these therapies.
Oh no, I think Emily was like snapping her fingers.
Oh, I thought she was doing the month. That's just doing the month. That's doing the money.
No, I don't think she was doing that. I think it was
either way,
in agreement with like, yes, like, yeah. But also I think like cool. Aaron, like going back to what you said, but like sometimes like you're who you're seeing will say like, I can't help. That's something that we've talked about a lot in the group too, is just kind of like when someone says that to you and like, or like a lot of people have had like doctors that have said like, this is as good as you're going to get. And we've talked about how like, no, that's not the case. That's just all that they're able to help with and like all they're able to do. And I think like if doctors like got better at saying like, I can't help you anymore, like I'm not skilled enough, then I think that would help people a lot more, because then you have all these people thinking like, oh, like I'm stuck like this forever. And I'm never going to get better. But really, it was just the doctor, the professional they were seeing, like, didn't have the resources, didn't have the ability. Like, it's not the person. The person's not, like, shit out of luck, you know? Mm-hmm. But that's a whole other rant that I just want to...
That's okay.
Such a good point, though.
No, I didn't have anything to say. I just wanted to raise my hand.
Oh.
Because it felt like
Emily,
felt like fun.
Okay.
But yeah,
I just agreeing. Aaron, go ahead.
The medical community too, I think, is having a good shift in terms of like the new doctors that are getting trained, and a lot of people, and being able to admit when they're wrong. Like there's a lot more, like I've noticed, where people are coming out and just being like, this isn't my field, this isn't my specialty. Like new doctors
is like the right person.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of community organizations more so are the ones that are picking up the slack in terms of being able to point the referrals in the right direction. And like I just want to see more of that come out, as like community health, where you're able to talk to more people and like figure out who has had what experience with which doctors and like where exactly that went and how it helped.
Yeah.
Definitely important and good. And
your sound went off fine there.
Me?
Yeah, or someone marred my audio, my output went weird, but it's back now. So don't worry about it.
Okay. But yeah, I don't know. It was like, all to bring back to Jordan's talk. I think it was just awesome that like he like was able to try so many different things. Like that was super cool. And then just the things that like really helped him, he said, were like the float tank. Like that's one of his like main ones. Like he has a inflatable one in his house. He made his parents get one when he was living there. And just like the diet and the meditation and the PL, I don't remember what the shots were, what the needles were, the injections.
PSP and something else.
It was like PRP, Prolo, and stem cell injections, I think. But those were some like really
PRP, protein-rich plasma, and something else.
Yeah. But yeah, it was just really cool that he tried a bunch of different things, and like, I mean, he was able to, which was awesome. And he recovered from like Lyme disease and his TBI, and now he's a personal trainer and he's a chronic illness coach. So he was able to take everything that he learned from his experience and like now he's like helping others and educating others on this stuff. And I don't know, he was it was great.
Yeah, that's good. So
awesome. All right. So thanks to Nick for helping us do this, and thanks again to Jordan for joining us. Everyone really enjoyed it. So we'll have a new podcast posted Monday morning. Our upcoming podcasts can be found on concussiontalk.com, Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. You can find more information at our group on concussionmtl.com. Our peer-to-peer support group is free and open to everyone. We hold 4 weekly meetings on Zoom, and one of these are in French. The link will be in the description. If you're interested in being one of our speakers for Thursday morning, you can email us, find us on Instagram. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and thanks, Aaron, Nick, and Emily for joining today.
Thank you.
HeadCheck Health bridges gaps in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Trek Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada, who rely on HeadCheck to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more. The music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound, www.bensound.com.